I'm genuinely sort of in awe of the idea of having one screen because I find so I guess you run games in person mostly, presumably.
Both. I run games
Okay.
both in person and
And
online.
you
Yeah.
DM online with one screen?
Not only that, I DM online with just a laptop, so I don't
Wow.
even use my 27-inch screen for that. My wife and I both usually play in our online games, and she and I both have our laptops up in our dining room, and so I have one 15-inch. I think it's a 15-inch screen. Yeah, and I run on a Mac, and it's just easy for me to swap from one screen to another. So I
Mm.
usually have a bunch of full screens, and then I can do like the four finger slide, and it just shifts one monitor to the other. So
I'm in
instead of me
awe.
looking to my left, I just swipe. But I also don't run VTTs, right? I
Right.
almost everything is theater of the mind.
Okay, that makes more
So
sense. That makes more
yeah, so
sense.
there's usually no visual battle map or anything like that. Not always, but most of the time there isn't.
Yeah, because I play entirely online because my group is split between China and Denmark and where I in the
Yeah,
UK where I
sure.
am and various other places,
Right, right.
and I've got Tailspire the VTT on one screen,
Hmm.
and then Teams on one screen, and
Hmm.
then also all the combat encounters on this screen, and then also all the D&D Beyond stuff on the screen, and then also everything else on
Yeah,
the
right,
screen, and it's just like
right, right.
I
That's a
need
lot of.
I need more screens.
Yeah. The funny bit is I actually use physical books during my online games. So like I have a little easel and I have my my whatever RPG I'm running,
Mm.
and I have like, here's my monster manual, and I'll look up monsters in the monster manual right off there. So I haven't needed to. Yeah, I even have digital tools that I make, but I don't use them because that's like for my own. I like to have the physical books
I
and physical dice and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got physical dice. I've got
Yeah.
not that I roll them, a whole thing
Yeah.
of them, just because.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's just it's amazing. Anyway, shall I do the intro?
Sure.
Cool. Hello, one and all, and welcome to Creative Spark. This is my YouTube show where I talk to cool people about the cool things that they are doing, and with me today is someone who thinks you should just put your feet up and take a load off. Mike Shea from Sly Flourish.
Yep, that's me. Yeah, yeah,
Hello,
yeah. Well,
how are
thank you for
you?
having me on.
Oh, it's
I'm good.
yeah. Thank you for
It's a
taking
good time.
time.
Yeah.
But yeah, uh, you are interesting. So I mostly interview YouTubers, and I don't know if you consider yourself a YouTuber primarily.
Um, no, not primarily. But it is a big part of what I do, and it is a big draw into the other work that I do. So I started by writing and got
Mm,
into YouTube. I can't remember. That's 3 years ago was when I started doing it in earnest.
mm,
And but I've been writing for RPGs for 15 years or so, and I had a big pile of books that I'd already written before then. So for me, it was kind of a different angle than I think a lot of other sort of YouTube
mm.
RPG folks take, where they start on YouTube and then kind of like branch out into making products and things like that. I
Yeah,
kind of came at it from the opposite direction.
I did check. Your first video was 31st of December 2011.
Yes, and I think was that the like, hey, here's a picture of the crap that I
Yeah,
take to conventions, and it has like, I don't know, 500,000 views or 1 million views or something like that. It has a ton of views on that, and it's an awful video, right? And there's a one thing is like I was using like an iPhone 3 to shoot that, and it had a sensor on the camera sensor is a purple blob, like it was a defect in that phone. I got it replaced like 3 days later, and but that blob, you can see it floating around on the screen when I'm shooting that video, and every comment is about the purple blob, right? Like everybody wants to point that out. And it's like I haven't had the phone, and they're still talking about it. I'm like, I've had like 5 phones since then, but they're still talking about the purple blob. So that's yeah. And then like when I started doing the kind of shows that I do now, which is
mm,
also really kind of a weird way that occurred. I was like, I had heard a guy at a seminar who said like, look, you can stream yourself doing your income taxes and people will watch. Right. That like, people are always worried about, oh, I don't want to stream because, nobody's interested in what I'm
mm,
doing. And they're like, they'll be interested in anything. Like, it won't matter. Just go, go do it. And I was like, okay, well, a lot of people have said, hey, you wrote this book about game prep. I don't really understand what that looks like when you're
mm.
actually doing it. And I was like, okay, well, I'll do that, and I'll do it online. I'll do it on a stream,
Yeah.
right? And so I streamed on Twitch and recorded it and threw it up on YouTube. And I think that's when I kind of, again, you can sort of see like when I started doing more videos was
Mm.
around that time. And they were terrible too. Like you can go back and look at those and oh my God, they're awful. Right. Like, and I mean, but it's cliche, right? The cliche of, oh, my first video sucked,
Mm.
is really high, but it's true too. And then that evolved. And the funny thing there is I started to get on earlier and earlier. I always did it like I have a game I run on Sundays. I've been running it for, I guess about 10 years. And I was like, well, I'll do the prep for that game that Sunday morning. So I'll start streaming at 10 a.m. on Sunday, and then I'll do it for like an hour, and then I'll be ready, and then I can go run to the game shop with all my crap and run the game.
Yeah.
And I started going on earlier and earlier because I started to be like, hey, I just want to warm up a little bit and talk about what's going on. And I'm like, well, let me start talking, So I was like, hey, what's going on in RPG world, right? And so I started doing like 10 minutes, and then 10 minutes before the show, I'd talk about whatever was on my mind, or people would bring up topics, and then like it became 15 minutes and then 30 minutes, and then I started like, well, now I have like the pre-show where we talk about RPG stuff, and then I go into the prep, and then I'm like, this is kind of its own thing. Why don't I start recording that as a separate video, or I'll split the video up and I'll do that, and that became the Lazy RPG Talk Show, and now that's way more popular than the game prep videos that I do, right? But it kind of came from that weird angle. I never sat down saying I'm going to do a 1 hour RPG talk show. Right. It just sort of spawned off of everything else. So, yeah.
I think your video output is a lot different to the vast majority of D&D tubers. Like, I do interviews and I do reviews and I do like homebrew stuff. And then obviously you've got people like Bob Wellbuilder who do... There's a lot of advice, player builds or DM advice, things like that. The talk show angle is one that you just don't really see.
Yeah, and it's because YouTube doesn't really like it, for one. So I've definitely had it where... one thing I do is I also shoot it as both a video and a podcast, and I think the 1 hour format works well for that. And but YouTube tends to I think, and you talk all day long about the algorithm and what the algorithm likes versus what people like and everything else, but like I think the videos that tend to do well, from what I understand, and it's always a shifting landscape, is like that 12 to 18 minute long video, right? Like, and that's why you see a lot of YouTube, like folks like Bob Wellbuilder and Professor Dungeon Master and others who do these sort of like 12 to 18 minute videos where they cover a topic. They're usually really well produced. Yeah, they have a script. Right, Bob's walking in the woods. All kinds of stuff going on, and that's usually more work than I want to do. Right, I don't really. I do like a little outline earlier in the week of the things I want to talk about on the talk show, but I'm not going to go, hang out in my local woods. And I like that format. It also fits like my life, like that idea of like, hey, at 9 a.m. on Sundays, which is a terrible time to stream, but whatever, right? I get a lot of folks from Europe, right? Because that's the middle of the day on Sunday for them. And I can record both shows at once. I can edit both shows that afternoon, and then they're both prepped and ready to go for the following week. That format works well for me. And it, like the other sort of like lazy GM philosophies of find the efficiencies, right? Like look at the things that you can prep that have the highest impact. And for me, it's like, what is the easiest process that I can fit into my life that makes the thing I like to make, that can draw people into the work that I do and offer something that they find entertaining. And so that's the angle I take with that.
What was the point at which you realized that like the lazy GM thing was what you were going to go with?
So I had written a couple, it was probably, I think it's like 2012. I have to, now you're going to make me look.
We do our research live here.
You do, right? Exactly. Well, I didn't know what you're gonna ask.
No, I mean, there's
have a date in it. Yeah, 2012, November 2012. So, I had written. So, 4th edition D&D was when I started getting into like actually publishing D&D stuff, and like making my own things, like starting a blog. And I had this idea for a blog. There was a blogger and podcaster who I followed back then, I still kind of loosely follow today, named John Gruber, and he had another friend named what was his name? Damn, I can't remember his name now. But they did blogs about like Mac stuff and life hack productivity sort of things. Right. Not Michael Mallon. That's another. Michael Mallon's a friend of mine. Michael Mann? No, that's a actor or director. So they did a thing about like blogging, right? And this was in the 2010s, right? So like blogging was a thing, and this was when like mainstream mainstream news was like, oh my God, we're getting eaten by bloggers, right? Like, and so blogging was actually like where YouTube is today, right? And that, like, how do you make it? And they were like, you don't want to be the blogger who writes about Star Wars, and you don't want to be the blogger who writes about like Tatooine. You want to be the blogger who writes about that one Jawa in that one scene in Tatooine and be like the go-to guy for that Jawa. And so if anybody in the world is like, hey, what's going on with this Jawa? They're like, oh, you need to go talk to this guy, right? He knows everything about that Jawa. He spent his whole life focused on that Jawa. He has a blog with 1,200 posts about that Jawa. And I like that idea. So I said, like, okay, well, I'm enjoying D&D again. I was in 3rd edition and 4th edition was just coming out. And I was like, but I don't want to write just about D&D. And I don't want to write about 4th edition D&D. I want to write about DMing 4th edition D&D. I want to focus on the DM perspective. Like, what does it take for a DM to run 4th edition D&D games? And that's, narrow, right? It's not RPGs. It's not just D&D. It's not just 4th edition. It's DMing. And that worked out. And I randomly looked for domain names that also matched powers that characters had in 4th edition D&D until Sly Flourish popped up. And I said, oh, that sounds good. I'll use that. Not thinking like, oh yeah, 15 years later, I'll still be using the same. And now, like, my understanding is Wizards has, stopped using the term because they don't want to use the term.
Because it's yours now.
Because it's mine now. And I'm like, well, that's not exactly true, but whatever. So I started doing the blogging then, and I got interested in like writing short books, and I wrote a book called Dungeon Master Tips, which was like a culmination of the tips that I had been writing about on the blog for 4th edition D&D. And then I wrote another one called Running Epic Tier Games, which again was like, how focused can we get? Like, what if I write a book that's just about running high tier 4th edition? And that turned out not a lot of people, for that one, but it was relatively cheap to produce. And then my 3rd book was The Lazy Dungeon Master. And that one was right at the edge. I don't know if I think the play tests for 5th edition were just happening then. I think if I went back and read the book, right then was when D&D Next was a thing. So this was, 2012. Yeah. So 2012 was, halfway, it was at the tail end of 4th edition. Right. And they were just starting to talk about the play tests. And I realized, talking to a lot of game masters and reading from like the people who were making the game, lots of people who were, had very invested in RPGs, who talked about like a very common problem. Hey, I prepped a whole lot and the players went left and then I had to improvise everything.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of them are like, then a lot of other people, like, yeah, that's why I don't bother doing prep. Right. Yeah. Or I prep. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And I started to change how I prepped games. And I had this idea that like all you need is like an index card, right? You can get an index card. You can write, I think it was like, where's your session going to start? What are 3 NPCs they're going to interact with? And what are like 3 scenes that you're going to run? And if you had that, you didn't need anything else. And so I wrote a book that was kind of around those ideas and around the, it's heavy on like, what do you need to prep and what do you not need to prep? And how can you change the prep in order to fit that? And that book resonated a lot. And it was way more popular than the other 2 books that I had done. And I was happy with that. And I think I wrote a couple of other books after that. Now, for 5th edition D&D was out, I wrote Fantastic Locations and Fantastic Adventures. And then I went back and I was like, here's the problem. I don't even use that anymore. Like I'm my own prep doesn't follow my own book. And people are still like, oh, you should read Lazy Dungeon Master. And I'm like, well, I guess you could read it. That's great. And thank you for buying it. But I don't follow it anymore. And I remember like playing a lot of From Software games, and I was playing Bloodborne. And one of the things I loved in Bloodborne was that the story of the game was embedded in 1-sentence descriptions of items you would pick up in the game. And I was like, that's fantastic. Like, this is really cool. You're learning about the story of the game by like this, you picked up a cloak and it talks about the hunter that previously had the cloak and all this great stuff. And I was like, that, putting that in our D&D games is really cool. And this idea, and that kind of spawned the idea of secrets and clues, which then I started doing all the time, which is this idea that you have like a list of 10 secrets that you prep before the game. You don't prep where they're going to find them. And then you improvise their discovery during the game itself, right? And it's, to me, it's that it's kind of the key definition of like, how do you prep to improvise, right? How do you write down things that are valuable to you to have ahead of time, but you can have the flexibility to drop them anywhere? And that alone became sort of the catalyst of like, okay, I need to do a new book. And then I wrote Return, and it had the 8 steps, and one of the steps is secrets and clues. And then it kind of expanded off. And that one I'm much happier with than the first one, because I still follow that philosophy. It's now, I think it's 6 or 7 years old, and I'm still doing that every time I prep hundreds of games a year, or about 100 games a year. I'm using that same process. I've seen other people using the process. I've gotten a lot of feedback on the process. I've refined it, right? There's different kind of ways to think about it. And I change things here and there, but like the 8 steps are still the same catalyst, right? I don't feel like, oh, there's a 9th step I forgot, or I really don't need this step, right? This step is, I don't, here's, this one step doesn't really need to be around. There's definitely, and the book already talks about it, the idea of like, there are steps you may not need for the session you're going to run.
Yeah.
In which case you delete them. Doesn't mean they're not, you'll never need the monsters, right? Never, this is a whole step you're never going to require. Probably not. You probably need them at some point. So that's, I think that was a super long-winded way of answering the question of where Lazy DM came from.
You do a one-man talk show. I think it's perfectly reasonable that your answers would be long. It's fine.
To somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh wait, yeah.
Oh wait, there's someone else here. Yeah.
Hey, I get it. At what point did you feel like the YouTube channel was becoming more than just sort of, I don't know, like an extension of your blog, I guess?
Yes, that's a good question. Probably. Oh, okay. I'll I think it was about 2 years ago. I'd have to go look specifically, and you could tell by when my microphone changed. So there was a moment, and you could tell when like I stopped using a webcam and got an actual mirrorless camera. Yeah. And when I got a decent mic, and I went through like 4 or 5 microphones in like 3 months until I finally came to the same SM7B Shure that everyone in the world uses, right? And except you got something new there, but like yeah. So but it was when I like my wife and I were talking. My wife wasn't yet. My wife is now my business partner in it. We own the company 50-50 after she retired from her job and then started working on this. She now works more on Sly Flourish than I do. And even though we're 50-50, I guess that's not exactly evenly distributed. So and I remember going like, wow, I'm looking at Patreon and I'm looking at book sales and I'm surveying people about how many people are finding the other stuff that we make and it's earning this much money. And I haven't put anything even close to like 1 month of that income into the equipment that I have for YouTube. So, I'm going to take like 1 month's worth of that value and I'm gonna put it into equipment, right? And it's like I should be putting it into the stuff that's helping. So instead of like a USB mic, I got an actual mixer and an XLR microphone, and again went through like 5 microphones, got the mirrorless camera. Boy, that was a learning curve figuring out how to get this camera to work.
I'm not looking forward to having to figure that out at some point.
Lighting, getting my fancy remote lighting, that's too bright. So that was really when I recognized like, okay, this is now a valuable enough input that it deserves to have, actual money behind it besides just time. And I think that was about 2 or 3 years ago. YouTube. So I don't, it's hard to know for sure. But I can say pretty definitively that for Patreon, about 50% of patrons find me through YouTube.
Okay.
Right. So about half of the people that are joining my Patreon, the first way that they interacted with the stuff that I do or that became aware of the stuff that I do was through YouTube. The other 50% is broken up. So about another quarter of it are people who bought my books already, which is weird because it's like, if you think about the marketing funnel, right? Buying books is kind of the bottom of the funnel. Like that's what I want you to do in the end.
That's the aim.
Right, that's the aim, and that's how they were discovering my other stuff. Right, is I bought your books first, and then I found out you have a blog, and then I saw that you're on YouTube, and you're like, wow. And yeah, I presume that's mostly through Amazon. I hope it's through other avenues too, but that one I can't really tell. There's no really good way for me to survey how people bought a book. So and then it's kind of split between podcast and blog and sort of other stuff. The other sort of what I will refer to as traditional social media platforms are almost zero.
Yeah.
Right. That like, X/Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And, I did a little bit of TikTok and I did a little bit of Instagram. My wife now runs our Instagram account. So we have more going on there, but I did like Instagram short video form. And I did YouTube shorts for, about a 3-month period. And that led to almost zero, right? Like surveying it after the time and measuring it in other ways, people were not finding the work that I do. They were interacting with that. Yeah. And never leaving it. Right? Never going anywhere else. So Yeah, so YouTube to me is like the last bastion of a big driver for people to find the work that I do. You know, and we talked about algorithm, you know, and I was watching a video yesterday where we love, I don't know how you feel about it, but boy, people love to complain about the algorithm, right? And Google's hosing us. And part of it is like, well, yeah, but if they weren't, it would be zero, right? That like,
yeah,
I can see like I would prefer as a user to have YouTube more like a podcast where I find individuals, subscribe to them, and then I have my feed that shows me everything that they do.
Yeah.
And we actually have that in YouTube, right? There's a
The subscription tab. Yep.
Yeah. And you go and you can subscribe to people and it will show you, I think, everything that anybody has produced in a time series kind of thing. But very few people use that. They go to the
homepage
recommended for you, right? And that's algorithmically generated. If it was only the subscription side, instead of the 40%, it would be a lot less, right? Like, or it might be less, but I know it would be fewer people, right? Because that's discovery. Like that's the only way they find it. And I get that, like, you know, rage clickbait YouTube thumbnail stuff is, you know, both negative, you know, and draws people in. Right. So we have that kind of problem of nobody seems to enjoy the kind of thumbnails and sort of content that we're making, you know, depending on who we are.
Yeah.
And yet we do it because, and Professor Dungeon Master has talked about this, right? He's like, no one watches my videos where I'm doing like handcrafted castles, right? But everyone is watching my video where I complain about how Wizards of the Coast, you know, crap the bed again. So like, you know, and he's like, he's not happy with it. I've talked to him, right? He's not happy about it either. You know, so I feel like, you know, not I don't think the algorithm and Google's use of the algorithm deserves our love, right? But I do think it's kind of, you know, if you know, depending on what we're asking for, we should remember that, like, well, what's the other avenue of discovery, right? Like what would be the better way that people would actually discover the stuff we did without necessarily knowing who we were ahead of time. So it's something I think about. I don't have an answer for it, but it's something I ponder a lot.
I mean, I talk to a lot of YouTubers, and everyone's just like, basically about the whole thing.
Well, like I'm kind of lucky in some circumstances because it's like, well, it's only 50%, right? Like I have another 50%, and I have half. You know, people are finding my work from other avenues than that. And the thing that really worries me is that Google will go the same direction every other social media site went, of saying we're going to downvote links.
Yeah.
And that we don't want you to actually leave YouTube to go anywhere else. So, you know, YouTube's always like, oh, well, we'll sell your products on our store here. And they're like, yeah, but nobody's buying them off your store. They come to my store and buy them. And, you know, so when I say, like, I don't ever do the, like, oh, make sure to like and subscribe and click the bell, right? I'm like, getting more engagement on YouTube isn't my drive. Getting you to subscribe to my newsletter or go visit my store or join my Patreon. Those are, you know, that's my, you know, subscribe, leave a comment, is join the newsletter, visit the Patreon site, and go check out the bookstore. Right. And those are the things I want you to actually do, particularly the newsletter, because if you're in any of those three, then you know who I am, and then I could reach you again. I can email you with a newsletter. I can tell you about. You're
not worried about the algorithm.
I can not worried about it anymore. Now, you know, that's why I think, like, I talk about the newsletter is the social media platform of the future, right? And it's like, it is a social media platform that I control. Like, I literally moved from one platform to another. I moved from MailChimp to MailerLite, and no one knew, other than the newsletter format changed a little bit because now I had a better way to send the newsletter out. But I was able to take 20,000 people and move them from one platform to another, and nobody even knew, right? And imagine if you could, like, oh, I'm going to take the 60,000 subscribers I have on YouTube, and I'm going to move them to PeerTube.
You can't.
Right? Or no way, right? There's no way to bring 10% of them over. So, you know, but podcasting you can, right? Blogs you can. I can move from one ISP to another, keep my domain, and nobody would even know that my site moved from one domain to another. You know, and they wouldn't know that it moved from one server to another, right? The domain name would still work. My podcast, I can move the RSS feed from one platform to another, and people could stay subscribed and everything like that. So, you know, newsletter the same way. So there's a lot. My store, right? The bookstore. We're doing Shopify now. If we decided we hated Shopify, you know, it would take some work to make sure all the URLs continue to work. But we could move the shop to another place and still have all the links work and have people find the books the same way, and they wouldn't even know. And that's just something you can't do with any other social media site. You can't do it with YouTube. You can't do it with anybody else. No.
It's a really interesting point, actually. I've never thought about it like that, because obviously when Twitter went the way it went, I moved to Blue Sky alongside a bunch of other people, and Yeah,
and lost all your
building
followers and had to regain,
exactly,
had to rebuild the whole thing. Yeah,
exactly.
me too. Right?
Which isn't the end of the world.
I did the same thing,
but it's aggravating, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing about moving, so I moved off Twitter even before the great Muskification, and I left because I saw that the algorithmic focus was getting into much more of angry.
Yeah.
You know, people were very angry, and there was a lot of, and that was stuff was getting boosted, and people were noticing that got boosted, so they were acting more that way. But the other thing I noticed from a business standpoint is nobody's engaging with my stuff anymore.
Just
right. It was like
just useless.
Yeah, I had like 40 or 50,000 Twitter followers, which mattered for a while. And then I was like, whenever I would post the thing like, hey, join the newsletter, that would get like 200 views.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's just views. Like it wasn't even that people didn't like it.
Yeah.
It was that Twitter never even put it in front of anybody. They'd put my other stuff. If I made like a hard hitting D&D tip, that got in front of a lot of people. But then if I'm like, yeah, but by the way, I have a book.
You can support me. No.
Yeah, right. And then there was all the gaming, right? Oh, I put a link in my second tweet, right? I heard Facebook actually just started recommending this too. That like, oh, you want to get a boost? Don't put the link in your first post. Put it in the second post. And you're like, no one reads the second post, right? So that was a point where I'm like, I think I'm just gonna walk away from Twitter, and never look back. Yeah. So
it makes sense. I ran an indie gaming website for a little while, and I remember seeing the numbers, and you get everyone retweeting and going, this is an amazing article, and then you look at the views in the article and you're like, more people have said what a great article it is than we've had views.
Reddit. Yeah, like right yeah, and
that's
right, it is very sus. And it's the one thing about YouTube that I'll be like, hey, they're doing it, no one else is like, they don't seem to be getting in the way of people finding your other avenues, right? Like, I haven't seen anything, or at least I haven't really tried, right? But I haven't seen, people definitely are finding my other work through the videos that I've got. I know that's true. And I know that it's, pretty good, right? Like I'm getting consistently more patrons every month than I had previously, more than are leaving. So that's been growing for a long time. And I could see the spikes as my YouTube channel grew. So did my, the patron subscribers. And they could just stop doing that and be like, oh, you're kind of advertising your own stuff too more. We don't actually want you going there.
Yeah, 100%.
And shorts is kind of that way, right? They're doing a big focus on shorts, and a lot of people are like, if I never see another short, it'll be too soon, right? Like I just don't. That's not the kind of format of material I'm interested in, and I don't really want to make them. And but they keep pushing them, right? And those I know I have tested and do not have the same kind of engagement that a regular video does.
Shorts are good for picking up followers who will never actually see any of your other content.
Right. Yeah.
It's a completely different thing.
I was at GameholeCon, and we had a bunch of other YouTube, or a bunch of other sort of, video creator type people. And they were talking about, and they said the same thing. Like, you would get massive amounts of people that might view stuff and look like it's a huge success, and realize there's no conversion, right? There's no way to turn those into anything other than that one view. Yeah. And a lot of people saw that, and a lot of people, kind of recognized, and some hadn't yet come to the conclusion of, wait a minute, I can't, like, I got, 250,000 views. I can't turn that into anything else. It's like, did you? Like, no. Yeah. Right. Like, did your business go up by that percentage? No. Okay. Like, it's the easy way to tell.
It's effectively a completely different social media platform, but where you can't actually do anything with it. Right. It's just a by thing design. On its own, floating in the ether. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. By design. Yeah.
What do you view as your like long-term aim for both the blog and the YouTube, and just your business as a whole, I guess? Sure.
I don't have one. So I have a philosophy, and my wife and I talk about this philosophy a lot. And we, whenever we're talking, it's wonderful now. Like, Michelle and I have been talking about, so she was into D&D before I was, right? For a long, long time. And we talk about it all the time. And we talked about it all the time, even before she was in the business. And now she's in the business, and now we talk about it even more. We were talking right before the show, right? We were in the car driving to go get coffee, going through our list of like, hey, let's, what's on our list for this week that we need to do. And the philosophy is help GMs run great games.
Okay.
Right? Like that's the ultimate goal of anything. And what we try to do is say, when we're looking at either a thing we're going to make, or something that we may want to kill, or a new path that we're going to follow, is it helping that? And this is actually interesting on the short form video side too, because I don't want to, the goal is not squeeze money out of people.
Yeah.
Right. So, something I keep in mind is like, is it true that short form video, if they offer a good tip on its own, the fact that there isn't any conversion may not matter, because they still got a good tip.
You're still doing the thing you're setting out to do.
I still followed the philosophy of helping the GM run a great game. I feel like, though, if I want to continue to do that, then I still need to make money enough to keep the camera going. But like, also I think like the better advice are the more long form kind of stuff that I want to do, right? Like the, even shorter YouTube videos of 7 to 12 minutes of, hey, let's dive into this one particular thing, or a blog article or a newsletter, or, ideally a book, right? That the material you're going to get from that, I think, is probably better than the stuff that I could hammer into a short form video. But it is something that I keep in mind. We don't have, so my wife and I, my wife retired from her day job. I've been working at my day job for almost 30 years. So we're closing in on just being able to retire anyway. So we don't have like a business goal of like, we certainly don't have a financial business goal. And we don't really have like an expanded, we wanted to grow into, X or Y. Like we're never, as far as I can imagine, we're never going to have more employees than we have now, which is 2, she and I. And we're probably going to keep producing the same rate of stuff. I liked to put out a book a year. Like one of my kind of general goals is I like to put out 1 book a year, but it's become, because the scale of the books that I create are harder, it's now more like every 18 months. And I'm already behind because I haven't started writing a new book yet. We just finished publishing the last one, and I haven't started a new one yet, which means it's probably 2 years out. So like, I'm already not following that trend. Right. But I also like, well, who cared? Right. Like, no one's going to be like 18 months from now, hey, where's your book? Right. You're supposed to have a book every, no one's going to ask that. And I've got an idea. And the thing I'm doing the rest of today is to ponder it. But also like, so even those are like loose goals, that we've got, but we don't have any sort of measures of like, we want the Patreon to reach this. One of the things I try to keep in mind, I talk a lot with other friends of mine in the industry, and we look at like, what's the current business of RPGs like, and what's happening with Wizards of the Coast, and what they're doing with D&D and Daggerheart, and how Daggerheart's expanding and stuff like that. And and a lot of, some of it comes from like we're worried that, if we consider that Wizards of the Coast is the main, sort of the biggest draw into RPGs, then if they screw things up, it could hurt the whole rest of the industry. And I think about that. I'm like, maybe. Like, we don't really know how bad they could screw up the industry, because they sure tried a couple years ago. And so where are we going to see that? But then I go like, well, I was there in the middle of 4th edition, where D&D was probably at its least loved, right? Like, a lot of people didn't love 4E. They suddenly love 4E now. It certainly feels like more people love 4E today than loved it when I was running it, back 12 years ago.
4E is the Dark Souls 2 of the D&D world.
Yeah, right. That's a very good, that's a very good take. Yeah. And I, but I was still writing stuff then. I was still writing blog art. I wasn't making any money, right? And I was still writing blog articles, and I was still writing books, and I was still running games, and I was still, back then, doing daily tweets about it. I was still enjoying that stuff. Yeah. And I feel like even if things went bad and it goes down, and like, the oxygen gets sucked out of the room and fewer people are playing, I'm still going to do this, right? Because like, I love it, and I've loved it my whole life. I've loved it since I was 14 years old. And there's a few things that I can look at in my life where I always liked writing. I always liked running D&D games. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I could keep doing those until I have like, one finger left, right, to poke a keyboard. So I'm kind of hoping that like, it really doesn't matter, that if our business dropped to 1/2 or it dropped to 1/4, our operating expenses are almost zero, right? Like, it costs very, very little for me to maintain what I've got. We have, I don't even know exactly what like our general monthly expenses are, but it's not high. Like the high costs are when we're like producing a book. Yeah. And even then, that's usually through Kickstarter. So sometimes we will have to, put as much as $20,000 into a project before Kickstarter. Yeah. Generally expecting that Kickstarter is going to pay that money back, and it usually does. Yeah. It has, right? So far it has. Like, we've been pretty good about being able to estimate where the Kickstarters are going to go, so we don't overproduce. But only in those circumstances where we're spending significant amount of money on overhead, which means that even if the business drops a lot, we can weather it. Yeah. Now, we're lucky that both of us have had full-time jobs. We don't have any kids. Our expenses in general for our lives are very low. Yeah. So our only risk is healthcare, right? And you're in a better state than I am in that. So
for now.
For now, right? Hopefully,
for now,
right? Yeah. So that like, and for us, like we're lucky, we saved a lot in retirement. So like, aside from healthcare, we could retire anyway. That puts us in a different spot where we can sort of just do what we want to do with this business side and not feel like if we shut down, 6 people lose work, right? Like Matt Colville, I don't think could say the same thing, right? Matt Colville couldn't say,
stress,
"Oh, if we drop to a quarter of, if we drop to a quarter of our revenue, we'll be fine." It's like, no, he's got employees, right? Like one of them's a friend of mine, so like, the other companies are at a bigger risk than we are, and I think from a long-term perspective, we like the fact that we can flex our business, to support kind of what our interests are.
Makes
long answer.
Sense. No, it makes perfect sense. This is an odd one. You've been doing this for a while now. Do you have any lingering sense of imposter syndrome about what you're doing and
no
anything like that? No, that's good.
I mean, everybody's got some.
Yeah.
Not really. And it's not because it's not there. It's just I've recognized it long enough. But I'm also I'm really lucky that, like, when I write a book, my editor is Scott Fitzgerald Gray, who's edited like, I don't know, 100 D&D books, right? So like, I don't have imposter syndrome because, he wouldn't be working with me. If it was really that bad, much less anything else. And then once he's cleaned it up, I know it's as good as anything that has come out from any of them. So I'm very proud of the work at that point. So that, that helps. Like we have really, really good artists, and I'm very happy with like the design of the book, and the printers are fantastic. Like the quality of the print runs are really great. And Scott's editing is, top notch. And so like, I feel like, I don't really have a lot of imposter syndrome, which is probably like because my ego is too high. Like a recognition about ego is like, I'm one of the few people I know who listens to my own show and enjoys it. Right. And most people I know cannot stand listening to themselves like on their own show. Like they would rather claw their eyes out, right, than listen to their own show. And I'm like, man, I'm funny. Right. Like I'm listening to my own podcast, laughing at my own jokes, and I'm like, okay, well, that's probably a sign, right? That's probably an indicator that my ego has outstripped my talent or whatever. But I don't know, whatever. Like it seems like it's okay, and so I don't have a lot of it, but it's not because I think like, oh, I'm really smart and this thing I'm going to write. I think about my shows, and I usually do have a thing, like I did one yesterday, right? And I did a spotlight for a product, and I felt like, I don't know if I really nailed that spotlight. Like I feel like if I had spent more time better articulating the things that I liked and the things that I didn't like in a more organized fashion, that I would have better served the listener in understanding what this product can do, right? And what it has and what it doesn't. And instead I was kind of like all over the place. I'm like zipping through the PDF going, oh yeah, I like this part. Oh, like, yeah, I forgot about this part. Right. And I felt like I could have done better. But on the other hand, it's like, well, I'm doing an hour show every week. Like if I did that level of effort, it'd probably be more than I wouldn't be. Probably couldn't keep up with it. So I definitely have that. I think I hope I'm self-critical enough to actually make my work better. But I don't want to be so self-critical that it gets in the way of me making anything. And I think I've got that. One thing that helps from like the book publishing standpoint is that I often released, and certainly for my last book, and then the book 2 before that, released almost all of it to patrons early over a long period of time. So they would get like 2 or 3 pages of stuff and review it and use it and run it and then come back with feedback. And you would get this impression that like, oh, patrons are all going to just tell you how awesome everything is because they like you because they're patrons. It's like, no, they'll definitely tell you when there are problems.
D&D fans.
These are, they're right. They're D&D fans, and they will definitely, they're nice about it, right? They care enough. So it's better than kind of putting it out in the wide open and having people from everywhere come and critique it, because these people actually do care enough about the stuff that I'm doing to want to help make it better. But I do get a lot of good feedback, and that feedback steers a lot of what happens. And that way, the stuff that gets to the point where we're ready to publish a book has been through hundreds of readers. Yeah. And that helps a lot, right? I feel a lot more confident because I know it's been written in the open and more people have seen it. I mean, like, so we just finished publishing City of Arches, and like there was a friend of mine ran an organized play program on City of Arches a year before it came out.
Oh, wow.
Right. So like, and I got feedback from that. Right. And the interesting bit about that feedback was like, she herself was like, look, I really think that this element you have in here gets in the way of a good time.
Right.
But then I ran it for 4 groups and they all loved it. So I was wrong. Right? And I was like, oh, that's really great. I got,
That's good to know.
playtest feedback of the criticisms of the stuff that I was putting out. And that, so that, I think that helped a lot. So yeah.
That makes sense. Just going back to the laughing at your own jokes, I was editing a review that's going up today as of the time of recording this. It'll be last week as of the time this goes up. And I told a joke during it that I do not remember saying, and I could not remember saying during it. And I was like, huh? Like, this is a solid joke, but like, when did I? Was that me?
You don't remember it?
It's like video proof of me doing it, and I'm still like,
yeah. Comes from us being on camera a lot, I guess.
I talk so, like I just talk so much, right? Yeah, like I have ADHD, and then I write for a living, and then I have 2 kids, and I say so many things in a day. I can't remember anything.
I can't be responsible for all the.
Yeah, it's too late. It's out there. If there wasn't video proof, I'd be certain I didn't say it. So,
right.
One last question then second to last question.
Sure.
Is there a dream project that you haven't worked on that you would love to work on?
Not really. Because I would just do them, right? Like, yeah, like I've reached a stage where I now have to balance, and I've had this come up a couple of times. I have to balance working on other people's projects with working for my own. I think of it like now that I'm in a 2-person company, I kind of think of the company as a separate entity. And then my work, it's like, well, am I going to write for Sly Flourish, or am I going to write for Company X?
Yeah.
Right. And Sly Flourish, I get a higher percentage.
That makes sense.
I get a percentage of the amount of money, but also the freedom. I mean, one of the reasons I got into self-publishing in the first place was like, I didn't want to have to fall under the restrictions that any other company would put on me. I hadn't really run into a lot of problems. Like, I did a lot of work for Wizards of the Coast back in the 4th edition days and right up to the end of 5th edition. And I was always happy with it. Like, I was happy with what, even stuff they killed, right? Like, there were times where I wrote like a 4,000 word thing for them.
Yeah.
And then it didn't get published because of whatever reason. And like, it didn't bother me, right? They paid me, and that was fine. And I still got the experience of writing it and everything like that. So that didn't really bother me too much. But I never liked the idea of gatekeepers, of gatekeepers in the hobby. And I feel like, I don't know if it's still true, but I know it was true a few years ago, that there was a lot of self-imposed gatekeeping going on. There were a lot of people who were like, oh, like, what I really want to do is write, a hardcover book for Wizards of the Coast. And you're like, you could just write a hardcover book for yourself, right? And then you don't have to wait for Wizards to love you.
Yeah.
Right. And I felt like, one of the things I always felt I was pretty angry about and stated so a lot was when the DMs Guild came out, and they said, hey, here's this platform where you can write stuff using Wizards IP, like Forgotten Realms and everything like that. You can use everything in the Monster Manual and not just the stuff that's available in the system reference document. We have stock art available for you, so you can actually use art in your books that is art that was commissioned by Wizards. I think that was you could do that, and you'd have this platform. But also, the designers of Wizards will be looking at those, and when we see people that we like, we may bring you in to work on other projects. And I was like, that's like a lottery ticket, right? Like, I can count on one hand the number of people who actually got that opportunity, right? And it was few. And they even had a program called the DM Guild Adept program, but nobody knew how to get into it. And it really seemed like the way you got into DM Guild Adept was either being so popular they couldn't ignore you, in which case you didn't really need them because you were already really popular, or be a friend with the guy who was running the thing. Yeah. Right. And we saw it, right? We saw, we could see, like, you can go look at the original Guild Adepts and be like, what had they written before? 0, right? Not a thing. And yet suddenly they're involved in the
networking helps.
And that was because they were cool. Networking helps. Yeah. It's also a corrupt system. So, so I always felt like that always bothered me, because I was like, I was self-publishing stuff, right? And I had been doing self-publishing even before I got back into D&D. I was doing it 20 years ago. I was writing my own little short stories and things like that, and getting them, doing print on demand. And like, throwing stuff on Amazon Kindle, right? Which you could just do with, you didn't have, nobody could get in your way from posting the Kindle store except Amazon, but they weren't doing editorial level stuff. They were just screwing you in other ways. Yeah. And so I've always felt that, like, that the self-publishing aspect gives so much more freedom and control of the work you do, and it's way more work, right? Like, there are parts of me where it's like, oh man, it would have been so much easier to, like, write this book for Ghostfire than it would have been for me to self-publish it, because now I'm not the one who has to check the galleys to make sure they're absolutely perfect before we print 5,000 copies. and then have something get screwed up, right? And it turns out we just printed 5,000 copies with an error on it.
Yeah.
Like, it's really nice when that's someone else's problem.
Yes.
But I still like the, I mean, you know, at this point, I remember there's sort of a moment. It was the minute we'd started doing offset printing, where like you actually go through the process of getting everything in layout and sending it to a printer and working with the printer and paying them whatever $20,000 up front for the print costs and everything like that. Where the shift from going from like print on demand to that was a massive change. And before then, I was really like, do we just want to work with another publisher to have them do all that stuff? And and there were a number of publishers who knew my work enough that they'd probably be willing to do that, but they would probably take a pretty high percentage of the cost. And worse, some editorial control, right? And they or even owning some of the content. Like there were some groups who were like, oh yeah, we'll publish it for you. And your text is still your own, but all of the layout, all of the art, everything else is ours, which means it's effectively theirs, period. Because what are you going to do, right? They can re-edit it, like not really. So, you know, so what it came down to is like, well, now we went through all that trouble. Well, now we're not going to work with the publisher because we've already got all the. I know the guy that I talked to about printing. I know who to work with on layout. We know the whole. You know, we got a whole distribution system, global distribution system in place that Michelle handles. Why would we not use that, right? We went through all the trouble of learning how to do it. Like, why are we not going to use that for our own work? So it's a short way of like, if I have a big project that I'm super, like a dream project that I want to work on, I would just do it. I would say, so I'll give a dream project that we've actually talked about, which would be like a lazy GM starter set, right? And I would love to kind of make a RPG starter set kind of thing that's built around lazy GM sort of philosophies, has everything you would need in order to run a game, and would include like in the box the tools, you know, the physical tools that can help you run that game, like, you know, a good dry erase flip mat and little generic monster tokens and all the sort of stuff that I've used and I've seen work that I think can give you, you know, something you could use forever and not need necessarily anything else. And the only thing stopping me from that is like manufacturing little gewgaws and doodads is a lot harder than printing books. And it just got harder because of tariffs. So like, you know, so that kind of gets in the way. A lot of times, like the thing that gets in the way is the complexity of the project, or even like the cost. My wife and I were, you're getting just the summary of the conversations I had with Michelle all today. But like, I've been working on some Patreon products, which are a bunch of scenarios that fit one of the campaign outlines in the City of Arches. So it's like 15 adventure scenarios, but they're kind of like toolkits. They're not a pre-written adventure. They give you everything you need to build an adventure on your own. But the recognition is you're running this. You have different characters. You have ways you're going to fit it in. So it's giving you those same way that the lazy DM idea is like get you the components to help you improvise. This is giving a GM the components to be able to build an adventure pretty easily, you know. And the idea is, well, okay, I've done 15 of these. Why not put those into a book, right? Like that would make sense. We could make a book out of it. And you're like, yeah, but the cost. You know, like I use Dyson maps because they were commercially available Dyson maps. We didn't have to pay for those. I either have no art or I use stock art, so that's super cheap. And I do my own editing, which is not fantastic, but it's like, well, you know, it gets us through the day. But to make those things would be like 30 grand, right? So like to put those into a book, it's like $30,000 just before you printed one of them. And I'm like, I don't think that those are going to be popular enough that it's going to earn that money back. So you're like, okay, the reality, like, would that be a dream project? Sure, right? I'd love to do it. But there's a cost factor too, and the cost factor is, if I'm doing a sequel to another product, it's going to do less than the original product did. And this is actually making a book of these scenarios is probably 150 to 200% of the cost of making the original, because adventures cost more to make than source books do because of maps, right? Maps cost a lot, and you need a lot of maps, you need a lot of art. So yeah, there's things like that get in the way of sort of the dream project. And I have reached this point where my dream projects are shattered before I even start thinking about them, because I already know the logistics of what it's going to take to make them. And I'm already like, no, stop thinking about that. Right?
That makes sense.
Yeah, but if I was going to pick a dream project where like I wasn't thinking about that stuff, the idea of like a lazy GM starter set that had all these components in it and was something that somebody could buy, cost like $30, nice box set, had adventures in it, had like, hey, here's how to do prep, enough material that you could continue to build adventures from that stuff. You know, ideally indefinitely. And had components that are like battle tested at games to be like, oh yeah, these are really useful things, and this will save you spending thousands of dollars on miniatures because you have 24 generic tokens that you can use instead of miniatures for your game, stuff like that.
Makes perfect
So I'll go
sense.
with that as my dream project.
Very cool. Is there anything you would like to plug?
My new book, City of Arches, is now available in the Sly Flourish bookstore. I would, if you want to know any of this work that I do, going to slyflourish.com is the best way to go there. And the 3 things I talked about, signing up for the newsletter, checking out the bookstore, joining the Patreon, are all available right on that website. But yeah, I'm really, really proud of City of Arches. Like, it was, a book that I think 2 years to make. Beautiful, beautiful hardcover book. And when I wrote it, it was definitely like, I wanted a book that built a setting that you could use the rest of your life, right? Where there's enough material in here that you could grab one paragraph and build a 20th level campaign out of it. And I think we hit it. And a lot of people have been running adventures in it. I wanted something where, like, you could buy this and run a 1.5 hour game.
Yeah.
And feel like it was valuable. Or you could buy this and run 20 years worth of, first to 20th level campaigns in multiple areas. And I feel like it hit it. I'm very, very proud of it. And
awesome.
So yeah, I'll plug that.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking time out and coming on. We organized this at high speed, which I'm incredibly impressed with. It's normally like, I could fit you in 4 months. So this was incredibly high speed, and it is appreciated.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, happy to do it. Yep. And thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, it was a pleasure. We're just going to wave at the camera, and then that's that. Nice, easy finish. So yeah, whenever you're ready.
Great.
All
all set. Take care.